Welcome to another Wind Down Wednesday. Melissa Dean with Lucky Palms Realty. I am tired. Look, my nose looks so red. I'm just ready for bed. Today was a hellish day. But we're celebrating a little bit, of course, with a glass of wine. And tonight's wine is Quinta das Caravaggio's Tinto 2021. And I was just going to pretend like I just pronounced that right, but I did not for sure. But it's very good. That's my review. Secured a contract today for a buyer, so congratulations to him, and off to the races. We're going to talk about appraisals. What's an appraisal, and what does it have to do with the contract? Why is it necessary? What's an appraisal contingency? How do we make a contract contingent upon an appraisal? So the short version of it is, when you're financing, you have to have an appraisal done. An appraisal is a buyer's cost, but your agent can negotiate. My neighbors are getting wild. But your agent can negotiate closing costs into the offer and have the seller pay for it. So if the seller's going to pay all your lender fees, that's part of the lender fees. So the appraisal will usually typically fall on the buyer's side, but if you get your seller to pay them, it will then be covered by the seller. And it'll just be a credit on the Alta statement that goes to the buyer, which then covers that charge. A lot of lenders will ask for the appraisal fee up front at the time when it's ordered. It is very crucial that your agent orders that appraisal after inspection periods. Why? Well, because if you decide you don't like the inspections, or you are planning on canceling because the house is getting eaten by termites, you do not want to be out all of your inspection costs and an appraisal cost. Several years ago, I think we were ordering them right when we'd go under contract, and then either the appraiser was getting screwed because they weren't getting paid when a buyer canceled, or the lender had to eat the cost and pay the appraiser because the buyer had canceled. So what we'd like to do is make sure we're moving forward towards closing date, and you've got to get out of that inspection period, because that's the 97.625% of the time when buyers will cancel. So that's usually when they're ordered right out of inspection period. Now we've got these laws set in place that these appraisers have to have these appraisals back at a certain time frame. So that will definitely help with getting the appraisal report in a timely manner and before closing, because that is going to be necessary to get the loan clear to close. So usually appraisals run between $500 to $700, just depending on the appraiser and probably the property. But I usually see them about $500-600. It is ordered by the lender. So when your agent tells the lender, hey, we're out of inspection periods, everything's agreed upon, we're moving forward, no one's canceling, go ahead and order that appraisal. That's when they go ahead and click the order button. It goes typically through a portal, and an appraiser picks it up. The lender does not talk to the appraiser. They may message them in a portal. Sorry, I choked on my air, choked on oxygen. They may talk through the portal, just like messaging, like, hey, just checking on status kind of thing. But lenders are not allowed to talk about the value or anything with the appraiser. So just basic minimum conversations can be had. That's about it. So then the appraiser is going to call the listing agent on that property and schedule when they're going to go out to the property to do the appraisal. How they typically provide you with the value of the home is based on comps in the area. So the listing agent, when they price a property, that's what they're pulling, are the comps, and it's going to be the same comps that the appraiser pulls. Now, if they're looking at the same ones, great, then they're going to find the value in that list price or that contract price. But sometimes we could be off a little bit, and if it's off, then the appraisal will come back with a report that says the contract price is $470,000, but we are only seeing this valued at $430,000. So now you have a $40,000 difference. And the seller may not want to come down in price, because what you're going to end up doing at that time is having to either renegotiate with the seller, say, hey, we're undervalued. We either need to renegotiate and come down at the appraised value, because your loan is not going to cover you for a house that costs more than it's worth. So you either have to come down to that appraised value, or you've got to come out of pocket as the buyer with cash to front that gap. A lot of times 40 grand is not an easy front, or it could be 10,000 or whatever, $2. It's not never $2, but you get the idea. If you don't have the money to come out of pocket to cover that appraised gap, and the seller's not willing to come down, then basically what happens is you have to go back on, or the seller has to go back on market, and the buyer's got to cancel and go find a new home. Which is a really crummy circumstance to be in on both sides, because nobody wants to go back and start shopping. You might be in the middle of moving or planning all of the details of your move. You're starting a new job, yada, yada, yada. So a lot of times too, that you'll have the sellers, the listing agent will have the option to go ahead and have a discussion, or go and fight the value on that home. If they're pulling comps that are different than what the appraiser pulled, a lot of times they'll have the option to go ahead and present the comps that they used. So maybe they'll reconsider that value. Let's see some other things on the appraisal report. Also, when the appraiser is out at the property, they may find things that need to be fixed. And it will say at the bottom of the appraisal report, here's the value, or value to be disclosed once the subject to items are repaired. A lot of times the appraiser will find things if it's not safe in the home, like I've come across sheds. Sheds that are in the yard, but there's wood rot on them, and the inspector most times don't inspect the sheds, but the appraiser will consider that part of the value of the home, so that's going to be inspected as well. And if they see that wood rot on there, they'll say, subject to repairs on this shed, wood rot must be fixed. And then at that time, the seller will have to have that taken care of, because if your agent does what they're supposed to do, they're going to negotiate in the contract at the time of offer that your repairs budget also includes the appraisal repairs. So general repairs, WDO repairs, open permits, anything on the 4-point that needs repaired, and appraisal. So there's going to be a list of things on all of these. You want to make sure that agent's got a good budget in there to take care of that if something comes up. Because if that does not get repaired on the appraisal report, the appraiser will not release the value and will not release the report. Therefore, you cannot get financing. So it's very important that those things do get taken care of. You can, in some circumstances, and it's definitely lender specific and financing specific based on your assets and how much money you put down, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to get into the details because I like to stay in my lane, but there are ways to waive an appraisal or get around not having one done. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to need to have an appraisal on the home that you're purchasing. So that is my nice long video. I apologize, but appraisals are a little bit more detailed and a little bit more complicated. Did want to discuss real quick too a contingency. Now we do have an addendum that can be added to the Florida FAR that makes the house contingent upon appraisal. So if you're doing a conventional loan, and now VA, FHA, since they're government-backed loans, those addendums are already attached in there, and we have a specific section in there that says if the house does not appraise at the contract price, then the options are to renegotiate or cancel. You can do the same thing on conventional, add an appraisal contingency, which also basically says the same thing, that the buyer wants to have an appraisal. They don't think that the home may be worth what the contract price is, and they're going to make it contingent upon it appraising. So if it doesn't come in at value, then the buyer again has the option to cancel and receive their earnest money that's sitting in escrow, because it will be protected by that appraisal contingency. So just make sure that you're having that discussion with your agent so you can completely understand it, because of course this is all house specific, loan specific, buyer specific, all these things. But 9 times out of 10, an appraisal is a must for financing purposes. So thank you for listening. Melissa Dean, Lucky Palms Realty, and enjoy your Tuesday on my Wind Down Wednesday. Have a good night. Bye.